All right, time for another update and forecast on the various wildfires going on across California. This imagery right here is from the Sites Fire. I'd say that's the main wildfire we're going to be talking about throughout the day today, just because it's the one that appears to be the most active right now. We're also going to look at the Post Fire and the Aero Fire as well. So maybe just a good place to start is a list of all of them. If you're interested in the acres and containment, we'll get that out of the way, and then we could go into the details like the weather forecast. So Post Fire is the largest one. That's over 15,000 acres, 39% containment. We've seen that number come up recently. So that's some good news there. Sites Fire, that one's also around 15,650 acres. That one only has about 5% containment at the moment. That's the one where we're seeing the most smoke coming off of it right now. You can actually see that from the satellite imagery. Although I will say not as much smoke as yesterday, and you notice a lot of the smoke that's out there actually seemed to be from this morning. We had an inversion earlier this morning, which you could kind of think of that as a lid on the atmosphere, which traps all the smoke in there. So as the winds are coming up this afternoon and that inversion is lifting, we're actually seeing a lot of that smoke dissipating and not seeing a whole lot of new smoke being produced. If I zoom in there, right there you can see some of that new smoke being produced. So that kind of goes along with this part of the fire that we're seeing right there. But again, that one is at 5% containment, and then the Aero Fire is around 5,000 acres, 33% containment. And I got a lot of comments yesterday about me not saying where these fires are, so I will do that before I forget. Post Fire, Los Angeles, Ventura; Sites Fire, Colusa; Aero Fire, Calaveras. So let's go to the Sites Fire first. Can see there's some aircraft on it right now, and it looks like they're mostly on the northeastern edge of the fire. As always, I'm not going to specifically go over the evacuation orders and warnings because by the time you're watching this video, they might change. But if you go to watch duty, you can actually, I guess you can't click on it. Yeah, I used to be able to click on it, but there's the list right there. You don't really need to click on it. And then I'll maybe just read this right here because it's a pretty good description of what's going on. Last night, several spot fires were observed. That's where burning embers are picked up by the winds, tossed ahead of the major blaze, and then they start new little fires, with the largest being 10 acres. I almost wonder if that's what we're looking at on that imagery right there, if that's one of the little spot fires that might have started. Weather concerns today include wind speeds, low relative humidity, and high temperatures that can lead to extreme fire behavior, and then they have some air attack on it. So before we get into the weather forecast, I just want to see where we're seeing some activity on this fire. The red stars right there are going to be where the more recent fire activity has been. The yellow is going to be the most recent fire perimeter. And then just so we can also get our bearings, see that water, that body of water right there? If we zoom in here, that is the East Park Reservoir. So it looks like at first, the first time I did a forecast on this fire, it was when we still had those northerly winds, so it was pushing the fire down to the south, and a lot of our growth was down here. Now it looks like most of our growth is actually on this side, and I wonder if it has to do with the fuels that we have in this area. It seems like, I don't know, that's a greener color than these other areas, which would make you think it has more moisture, but it also might mean that there's perhaps more fuel in this area to burn. One thing that we can do is look at all satellites, and that kind of further goes along with the idea that we have some heat on this northeastern section of the fire right there. Interesting to see that it's calmed down on the southern edge, at least from the information that we have to work with here. Now, before I go any further, I should say not everywhere under these red boxes has burned. It's heat signatures picked up from satellites in space, so it's not exactly precise, but it gives us a general idea of where on the fire we're seeing the most activity. And even within the fire perimeter itself, not everything in there is burned. Some unburned islands haven't even been touched. Some areas might have low severity burning, some high severity burning. So there's a bit more nuance. It's not like everything within that has just been destroyed. So keep that in mind when I do what I'm about to do, which is click on structures right here. It's the little orange flashing dots. I'm going to go back to modus and veers just to get rid of those boxes for the moment. Some good news, it doesn't look like there's too many structures on the side of the fire where we're seeing the most activity. Again, this is the sites fire we're looking at in, I believe that's Colusa County, yes. If it was on the western side of the fire, you could see all those structures that we have over there. And then just one other thing, I learned this new little trick. We have Clear Lake down here. I'd imagine more people know Clear Lake than whatever that reservoir was. It's about 20 miles northeast of Clear Lake. So that's also getting our bearings right there. So basic summary there. Most of the activity is on the northeastern side of the fire. Doesn't look like there's too many structures in that area, but there are some, so that's why I'm continuing to cover this. So now getting into the weather forecast, kind of goes along with what we were reading on watch duty. Some warm temperatures today. It actually looks a little bit warmer than yesterday, some mid-80s out there. Wind direction has shifted around. So in the past, it was a northerly wind. Looks like this afternoon, it's going to be coming more from the southeast, but it's not that strong. You notice those sustained winds are less than 10 miles per hour, which means you'll have some gusts around 15 to 18, but that's certainly not the 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts we saw when this fire was really taking off at the very beginning. So that kind of goes along with why we're not seeing that much activity on the fire right now. Although given our relative humidity is still in the teens, although that is a little bit higher than we have been in previous days, we could definitely see more activity on this fire as we get into the peak of the afternoon, which is usually around 3 or 4 p.m. And then when we look at tomorrow, it's interesting that temperatures go up into the low 90s, but our relative humidity actually goes up as well. So temperatures going up, you would think is a bad thing. Relative humidity going up is a good thing because the more moisture you have in the air, the more moisture goes into the fuels, and then the slower the fire is going to go because it has to use some of its energy to evaporate the moisture out of those fuels. But 20%, that's still pretty dry out there, so we could still have some fire activity tomorrow. But you know what, to be honest, we're not seeing that much activity on it right now. I'm going to keep an eye on this camera as the day progresses. But I think with the decreased wind speeds, that's pretty cool right there. Did you see that? I'm going to replay that. Watch this like ripple happen right here, right about there. I don't think I've ever seen that on a smoke plume before. I'd love to know if anybody could describe what's going on right there. But that's the sites fire. Now let's check out the post fire. This one is in Southern California. I'll zoom out so you can get your bearings. Again, it's Kern, Los Angeles, and Ventura counties. Notice there are still some evacuation orders on this. Looks like we have aircraft on the fire at the moment. It says it's 39% contained, but this is the largest fire that we have going on in California. Now, when we look at the satellite imagery of SoCal, I'm not really seeing any smoke coming up. Maybe right there, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly what that is, what we're looking at. Not sure if that's smoke coming up right there. So let's just go over to Cal Topo. This usually can show us if there's any activity. That's the fire perimeter on the post fire. Looking at all satellites, notice we're not seeing any of those boxes pop up that we had on the previous map. So based on this information, we would think there's not much activity going on this fire at the moment. Again, we're only as good as the information that we can find through all of these different sources. So I'm not going to say the fire is out, but that at least looks a lot better than previous days. So keep that in mind when I show the weather forecast right here, where it's still showing some gusts around 25 miles per hour. Looks like it's coming from a more northerly direction, which would act to try to push the fire down to the south. But I mean, the fact that we're not seeing any fire activity on it or heat signatures means that maybe the hottest part of this fire has kind of calmed down. Relative humidity still pretty dry though, around 15 to 16% today. And then tomorrow looks like temperatures go up, winds come down slightly, which is good news there, and then relative humidity comes up slightly. So that's also good news there. So sites fire looks to be the most active, although not as active as previous days. Post fire, not based on the links I have, not seeing any activity on it. And then that's also the case for the Aero fire. I've been looking at this one and I haven't been able to see any smoke come off of it or any of those hot spots on the map. With that being said, there are still a large number of evacuation orders and warnings, so I'm keeping an eye on it, but the official numbers for this one, 5,000 acres, 33% containment. And then we could give this a brief read, just to summarize the Aero fire. The incident command team is reporting favorable conditions and increased overnight relative humidity contributed to the growth in the containment of the fire. So that's good news there. Firefighters continue to observe pockets of heat in dense areas of vegetation and tree torching. That's where a single tree kind of catches on fire, with the potential of ember cast that can affect the fire line. So they're going to continue to strengthen the containment lines and cool hotspots within the perimeter throughout the day today. So it kind of sounds like they're sort of mopping up the Aero fire at this point, although there is still some heat, still some torching going on. So I'll keep an eye on that, but I will say I think the top one that I'm watching is still going to be the Sites fire in Colusa County. Oh, again, the Aero fire, that's Cal Fire County. I forgot to say that this time around. So yeah, on the Sites fire, just to summarize, because that's I think the top priority throughout the day today, as there's still some active burning going on. Temperature is higher, relative humidity actually a little bit higher as well, which is good news on that front. Notice the smoke plumes going mostly straight up though. That tells you that the winds aren't that strong, which goes along with the fact that we're not seeing that much activity on the fire currently. Peak of the afternoon, and usually peak of fire activity is around 3 to 4 p.m. though, so I'm going to keep an eye on this throughout the day today, and I'll let you know if anything changes. Thanks for watching, and I'll have more updates throughout fire season.